Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another exciting edition of Change the F Up. I am your host with the most, Nate the Effing Great. Doing it again solo. VictoriBelle is, of course, doing a lot of things. Of course, whether it is with her cosplay or whether it's with wedding season. So we will hopefully have her back on the show within the foreseeable future. But for right now, VictoriBelle, hoping that you are having fun with everything that you're doing and that we miss you here on Change the F Up. So I decided what was the best way for me to do this edition of Change the F Up. Well, I'm going to go back to the time where I actually did it as a different concept, where I took something that had some kind of potential to it to be amazing, and unfortunately it fell subpar, and I changed it up the way I like it because I'm an effing genius, no ding required. Now, obviously, in honor of TNA Slammiversary, the Impact Wrestling Slammiversary, GFW Slammiversary, whatever you want to call it, I decided to go back and do something that had so much potential to be amazing, but unfortunately it fell subpar because of two reasons. One being the fact that there was too much interference, and two because of Dixie Carter, and that was the world title reign of Magnus. And honestly, the way that it was built up for stars, it actually worked out very well. When they had the Bound for Glory series, they had Magnus as one of the top guys to basically win the whole thing. But then when AJ Styles came back, he went from the clean-faced, looking kind of, like a babyface kind of guy, to this rough and edgy looking guy with the soccer mom haircut and the scruffy beard and the leather jacket. He basically looked like, as we call, a badass. So he ended up winning the Bound for Glory series and challenged the world champion at the time, Bully Ray. Magnus would go on to face off against Sting, where it was a little bit of a passing of the torch, I guess you could say. Magnus would then go on to win the world title via shenanigans and help from Dixie Carter. And the thing was, he would have been a great world title run had not been for the interference every single time. I mean, his matches with Sting, with Jeff Hardy, with Gunner, with trying to think of some other names here, Samoa Joe. So many of these matches had potential to be great, but the thing was that every single time there was going to be interference, and then by the time that they decided, hey, let's just have him fight clean, he ended up losing to Eric Young. And far be it from me to say that Eric Young didn't deserve a world title run, it was not the best decision to do that. And honestly, it made Magnus look like a complete joke because it just showed that he was just a world champion who couldn't get the job done because he needed somebody having his back every single time. It just made absolutely no sense. So, time for me to change it up and make it better. So let's first start, of course, with the No Surrender event and, of course, the finals of the Bound for Glory series. I wouldn't change anything there. I would definitely still have Magnus and AJ Styles be the final two men, but unfortunately AJ Styles is the one who comes out victorious. He, of course, will go on to Bound for Glory to face up against the world champion, who is not Bully Ray. The man that he would be facing off would be Chris Sabin. Because honestly, you guys, having that as the main event definitely shows that the TNA Originals still are the most talked about superstars in that business. So having Chris Sabin versus AJ Styles in the main event definitely says money, money, money right there. So we have that going on, and I would not have Magnus go off against Sting. I would actually have Sting and Bully Ray compete at Bound for Glory, where if Sting wins, the Aces and Eights are basically done, which was probably the best way to do it because all the issues surrounded between Aces and Eights and Sting, so I might as well just end that way. That's just the way that I see it. But anyway, getting back to Magnus, he definitely still will have that edge where he still thinks that he deserves better and that he should be the next world champion, and he knows that he can beat anybody that can be put in front of him. That's when we pair him up with Kurt Angle, actually. Now, I know a lot of people are saying, but what about Kurt Angle and Bobby Roode at Bound for Glory? That happened, I believe it actually happened a couple years ago, actually. I want Bound for Glory to be one of those events where you see matches that you never thought you would see, and matches that have not been repeated at a Bound for Glory. So obviously I would not have, Chris Sabin versus AJ Styles 2 here. It would be the first time that they've actually locked horns there. You'd have Bully Ray versus Sting, where yes, they faced off at a, at the Slammiversary earlier that year. But hey, it's still Bound for Glory, and it still hasn't happened on that event. Again, Magnus versus Kurt Angle is definitely the good way to start building up Magnus as a higher upper card main event level player. So obviously the matchup happens, and Kurt Angle and Magnus, they tear down the house. The end of the matchup sees Kurt Angle lock in a ankle lock, but Magnus is able to counter into the Texas Cloverleaf and forces Kurt Angle to tap out. After the match is over, Kurt Angle extends his hand, shakes it, raises Magnus' hand, and he says, "You're ready, you're ready, kid. You are ready." So obviously this will go on to the next event, that being Turning Point. Now I know this is not exactly how TNA would have done it, because they changed it up, and they did this stupid idea of actually having the pay-per-view matches for free. We're not going down that route. We're not going to actually have that. That was a stupid thing that they did. Keep the pay-per-views going unless it's a need-be deal. So for right now, we're going to try at least, one more year with just these pay-per-views and see what happens. So, of course, Turning Point, we still keep the AJ Styles storyline, where he wins the world title at Bound for Glory, he leaves, and he goes to defend it everywhere, whether it be Ring of Honor, New Japan, a UK show, wherever, because, again, it brings more prestige to the TNA World Heavyweight Championship, and it also gives AJ options outside of that wrestling company. Now, I know that's not exactly the best thing they want to do, because, of course, they want to keep AJ Styles in there, but unfortunately, there is nothing you can really do to change that, and the same thing can go for Sting, but we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. So, we have a tournament to determine the next TNA World Champion, and how Dixie Carter did it was actually really good. I will say that for a lot of things that Dixie Carter did wrong, this was one of those things that I thought she actually did a good job on. Having the tournament matches all have a different stipulation behind it, and it makes it that much more thrilling and that much more exciting. So, of course, one of the finalists for this at Turning Point would be Magnus. The other one would be Chris Sabin. So, of course, we have the Dixieland matchup. During the Turning Point event, actually, Dixie Carter talks to Chris Sabin and to Magnus, basically saying to both of them the same thing about how it's great to be a part of Dixieland and how it's great to have Dixie on their side. Stuff like that. Chris Sabin seems interested. Magnus is like, okay, I'll definitely take that in consideration. So it's kind of a 50-50. He seems interested, but he doesn't seem interested. So people have an idea of, maybe Magnus is going to turn heel. Maybe he's going to turn babyface. So during this matchup, of course, what basically happened was that they were locked inside of a steel cage. They had to escape the cage and then go up the rampway and climb a ladder to retrieve the World Heavyweight title. So both of them, Chris Sabin and Magnus, they beat each other to just down as much as they can. Magnus hits a Michinoku driver on the ramp, and it seemed like Magnus is going to win. In fact, Dixie Carter is so happy that she extends her hand to Magnus. Magnus looks at it and just shakes his head and just passes off. Just maybe, like a brisk bump of the shoulder against Dixie Carter. Not too hard, because obviously you don't want to have, a kind of deal where it's like, oh my God, he hit a girl and blah, blah, blah. Just a little, light little love tap. So, of course, Rockstar Spud gets involved, and he's basically saying, no, you don't say that to my queen. You don't do that. You don't do that. You deserve to give her respect. Because Rockstar Spud is awesome, especially when he's a comedic heel. Magnus just tosses Rockstar Spud off the ramp. He climbs up the ladder, and he's about to retrieve the briefcase until the title, I should say, when Dixie Carter says, "Now." Out comes EC3, pushes Magnus over, knocks him down the ramp, and EC3 actually helps Chris Sabin up to the championship, up the ladder. Chris Sabin unlatches the world title, and Chris Sabin is your world heavyweight champion. Now, here's the thing about this. When they did this whole storyline with Magnus, it made absolutely no sense, because Magnus was already a tough guy, and he was doing so great on his own that he didn't really need a backup. He didn't need all these people, being behind him. It really made absolutely no sense. With Chris Sabin, it actually makes a little bit more sense, because as a heel, it does seem like he could use that backup. It definitely seems like he could use these guys. So what we're basically doing is we're taking the storyline that was intended for Magnus and we're putting it on Chris Sabin, because a guy his stature, a guy his size, it makes a bit more sense and it's a little bit more believable to see that. But we're not going to have everybody interfere all the time. No. But we're still going to keep Chris Sabin as this massive heel. We want it to be that Chris Sabin is so hated that they really want him to have that title off of him. That's how badly we want it to be. So we have a build-up basically going into Final Resolutions, in which we see Chris Sabin versus AJ Styles in a title unification matchup, and the winner will be the Undisputed Champion for TNA. During that same event, we also get Magnus versus Sting in a career-threatening matchup. The winner is the number one contender for the world title, but the loser will be done in TNA. Their contract will be torn up and they will be fired. They will be barred from TNA forever. So this matchup between Sting and Magnus is just built on respect. Magnus does not want to be the one who ends Sting's career, but he also wants that world championship. So you had that conflicting deal between Magnus and with Magnus, because you still want him to be a major babyface, but still some people are just kind of like, oh, maybe he's still going to be a heel. Maybe he's just going down there. So we're kind of really just mixing this up a little bit. And don't worry, this is not going to be one of those things where it's just going to be continuing on. No. This is just for these first couple months, because we still need to find a way to legitimize him as a huge babyface. So the matchup between Sting and Magnus goes on very well, and actually is the main event. No disrespect to Chris Sabin and AJ Styles, but this matchup is the final match for a reason, because both careers are on the line, and it also determines who is going to be the number one contender. And of course, we see Dixie Carter in her Dixieland watching this entire matchup go through, and we see this matchup just basically tears the house down. These guys just push each other to the limit. Sting hits a Scorpion Death Drop. Magnus kicks out. Magnus hits his Michinoku Driver and his elbow drop combination. Sting kicks out. So the Scorpion Death Lock, the Texas Cloverleaf, they're throwing everything they have at each other, and it's just not enough. Finally, Magnus gets the upper hand. He hits the Michinoku Driver. And then he goes to the top rope. He's about to hit the elbow drop, but he hesitates. And he's just ready to leap off, but he's still hesitating. He gets off the turnbuckle. He is just at a loss for words. He cannot do it. He can't pull the trigger. He is just, you see him get emotional. He is upset. He just doesn't want to do it. Sting sees this. He goes up to Magnus and he screams at him. He's basically saying, hey, if you show this kind of weakness to Dixie, she is going to eat you alive. You have to show no mercy. You have to be the bigger man. You have to be the one who takes her down. So Sting just slaps him right across the face, and immediately we see Magnus' face go from despair and sorrow to just anger and full-fledged focus. He picks up Sting and hits a thunderous Michinoku Driver, follows it up with a massive elbow drop on Sting. 1, 2, 3. Sting's career in TNA is over, and Magnus is your number one contender. And the moment when Magnus' arm is raised, Magnus realizes what he did, and he's just conflicted. Again, he cannot believe what he did. He picks up Sting, and he just basically says, I'm sorry. And you can have this backstory to where Sting is the one who wanted Magnus in the main event Mafia, where he believes that Magnus is the future. And Sting, he looks at him, he shakes his hand, and he says, hey, you were the better man. You deserve it. You deserve this shot. Basically putting Magnus over again. But Magnus, he raises Sting's arm. He leaves the ring, gives Sting his proper dues. And honestly, this would be a moment where you have Sting say his final goodbye. How they had it with Sting and Magnus was one of the worst things that they could have done. It was very disrespectful to Sting. if you have Sting close the show with him saying thank you to TNA and talk about so many of the memories that he's had with the company, I think that would make a really good feel-good moment for that. And it's a great way for Sting just to ride off into the sunset and, of course, go into WWE, because that is where the money is right now. But also because hopefully they do something amazing with Sting, which obviously they did not. Anyway, so we move on from that. Magnus is the number one contender, and he goes off to face Chris Sabin at the Genesis pay-per-view. Unfortunately, the numbers game gets to him, and he loses. So Magnus, again, he's wanting another title shot. He wants to be the number one contender, but here's another thing, is that we add another factor into it. You might say an it factor. Bobby Roode has aligned himself with Dixie Carter, and he definitely wants to be in the world title contention so much that he actually helps Chris Sabin defeat AJ Styles as well as Magnus. So he believes that he's the next in line here. This is kind of pulling a page from the Adam Blampier invasion storyline, where he talks about Triple H being a part of, Vince McMahon's deal and in the WCW deal, where basically, I kind of wanted a world title shot, and the person's like, you will get it later, but just get him. So that's kind of the same deal what's going on with Bobby Roode, and Bobby Roode's slowly getting pissed off about this, because it's like, I want this world title shot. I have earned it. I have proven myself. I want to fight Chris Sabin. So at Against All Odds, they actually make a triple threat matchup, because they really want Chris Sabin to win, and they really want to ensure that Magnus is indeed put down. So we see Magnus versus Bobby Roode versus Chris Sabin. They have Bobby Roode in there as extra reassurance, and Dixie Carter makes it to the point that she actually talks to Bobby Roode and says, if you help Chris Sabin win the title tonight, I will make sure that you are the most paid superstar on the roster, that you will be the most memorable one. You won't even want the world title. Just give Chris Sabin his due. Let him have this run, and let him be, the world champion. So this is kind of one of those things where Bobby Roode, he wants that world title, but he also is very enticed by this offer made by Dixie Carter. So it's a great matchup between the three of them. It basically ends with Magnus getting thrown out, and the Bromans, they come in, they take out Magnus, and basically Chris Sabin, near the end of the matchup, is yelling at Bobby Roode, saying, get down, lie down. And for a while, Bobby Roode just kept saying no, but then finally he gets on one knee. He hates it. He hates doing it, but he lies down, and Chris Sabin covers him for the 1, 2, 3. So basically, Bobby Roode sold his soul to Dixie Carter, and Dixie Carter keeps her word. She makes Bobby Roode the highest paid, quote unquote, wrestler in TNA. Makes him feel like a king, and just makes him just completely, just making him feel like a king, really. So we move on to the next event, which would be Destination X. Now, obviously, whoever the X Division champion is would be the one to challenge Chris Sabin. Now, this would be the moment where I would see the X Division champion fail, because Chris Sabin, again, has the numbers, but also we have this matchup where Chris Sabin actually uses more of the heel tactics, where, maybe it's a poke in the eye, or he uses the ropes, he uses the trunks to keep the world title. So it's kind of more one of those things where, again, you're hating everything that they're doing. You're hating the fact that Chris Sabin here is cheating his way to win. So again, we're waiting to see who is going to be the next, person to take on Chris Sabin. But during that matchup as well, we see Magnus defeat Bobby Roode in a number one contenders match for the world title. However, Magnus would go on to lose the opportunity against Samoa Joe when Bobby Roode cost him that matchup. Samoa Joe doesn't know. So he, of course, will say, hey, I had no idea. And it's not one of those things where, they turn heel or anything like that. This is where he realizes, Magnus says, okay, here's the thing. I know what I have to do. I have to make sure that Dixie Carter is out of power, and then I can focus on facing off against Chris Sabin. So he joins MVP's team, and they go on to, of course, beat Dixie Carter's team at Lockdown. And during that same event, Chris Sabin cheats his way to win against Samoa Joe. During that show, everything still stays the same, though. We still have Bully Ray be the special guest referee, but here's the thing, is that Magnus is the one who ends the reign of Dixie. Not MVP, but Magnus, because it's just one of those moments that is sweet for him, and you're building him up again as that superstar, that huge caliber main event superstar. So in turn, with helping MVP's team win and giving MVP the power, MVP announces the matchup at Sacrifice, being Magnus versus Chris Sabin for the world title. And the matchup between Sabin and between Magnus is just absolutely phenomenal. It takes every single other matchup that they've had in the past, and they blow it out of the water. You see, cradle shocks. You see hesitation drop kicks. You see classic Chris Sabin. You see a lot of the next generation deals with Magnus. Despite having interference from EC3, Rockstar Spud, the Bromans, we see guys like Kurt Angle and so many other people getting involved, taking out the Dixieland posse, whatever you want to call them. Magnus finds a way to pin Sabin 1, 2, 3 in the middle of the ring, and he wins the TNA World Heavyweight Championship at Sacrifice. And from there, we have him retain at the King of the Mountain matchup. We have him retain quite a bit more until he will eventually lose it at next year's Bound for Glory to the Destroyer, Bobby Lashley. Now, obviously, this was more just to help Magnus build up himself as a singles competitor, as a main event level superstar, and gives Chris Sabin a bit of a longer title run than just having him lose it 2 weeks later at a random event. That's just how the way it is. And honestly, having Magnus versus Bobby Lashley as the main event for Bound for Glory, I think that would do a little bit better than the tag team matchup, which featured, I believe it was James Storm and Yamada versus the Great Muta and Tajiri. No offense to those guys, but the TNA World Title needed to be on the line in this match, and the fact that it wasn't was very disheartening. But I can also understand that it was because of Bobby Lashley's conflict with, his MMA career, everything like that. So find a way to make that work, and you will have a great show and a great match between Bobby Lashley and Magnus. So so that is basically how I would rebook the title of Magnus. I mean, again, we built him up to a great upper card main event level superstar, give him a good storyline where he's chasing the title, but he's also got a reason to fight off against Dixie Carter, and he doesn't look like a complete chump everywhere he looks. So, yeah, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of Change the F Up, you guys. Of course, you can always find us on Facebook.com/Change the F Up 1776. You can check out my co-host Victory Bell's stuff. I mean, go check her out on Twitter at VictoryClark04, as well as on her Instagram, VictoriBelleCosplays. You can also check her out on Facebook.com/VictoriBelleCosplay. And I know she's got a website that she is working on, but until that is fully released, I will hold back on the details on there. So go check out a lot of her stuff. You can always follow me on Twitter at NateEffingGreat. And I also have an Instagram, but there's not much really to it, so I'm not even going to plug that. So that is going to wrap it up again. Like I said, for this edition of Change the F Up, I'm going to conclude with another song by the Eric Stewart Band. So thank you guys so much for joining me here today. We will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Crystal ball, I don't claim to know it all, I just wing it on the way. But I am sure this time, cause when it feels this fine, well, must be real as plain as day. I'm gonna bet this time to get this, miss the bus, I will regret this. I've searched both near and far, only to find love right where you are. It's written in the stars. Fortune tellers, tarot cards, shouldn't have to work so hard. Got a surefire, easy way. Just look up to the sky, it's there to tell you why this love we share is truly fate. I'm gonna bet this time to get this, miss the bus, I will regret this. Search both near and far, only to find love right where you are. Hey, it's written in the stars. Crystal ball, I don't claim to know it all, I just wing it on the way. But I am sure this time, cause when it feels this fine, well, must be real as plain as day. I'm gonna bet this time to get this, miss the